Yeah, I don't seem to be able to get it to, let's try this. There we go. Should be okay now? Yes? Can you see it now? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Yes, can you
Can see your screen?
I'm sorry? Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, okay, very good. And again, you can hear me fine too. Yes.
Okay.
All right. So thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you today about assuring quality in online learning. I have a few slides that I will share with you. I'm sorry I was not able to join you face to face in Turkey. That would have been my fourth trip to your country. I enjoyed very much each of my prior visits there, both as a tourist and also participating in several conferences. And it's been wonderful to meet many people over the years from your country. I'm going to concentrate on a few first principles today in talking about assuring quality in online learning. So I come to this with a very broad background. I worked across all four sectors of government, universities, philanthropy, and nonprofits over many different years in many locations. I've extensively worked and traveled in over 50 countries around the world, and I've taught in 16 institutions of higher education in 9 countries. I've also been a senior administrator in many different roles, both in foundations, in the state ministries of education in the states of New York and Rhode Island in the United States. I've been involved in many projects at the national level in the United States dealing with education as well as other topics, and also in international projects of various kinds over many years. So what I'm going to talk about today is really going to take us back to what I think of as first principles, because sometimes you can get so caught up in the minutia of quality assurance that you can lose sight of what are really some of the main things that we want to keep in mind at all times, and that will help us frame the kind of quality assurance processes that help learners and help others who wish to know about the outcomes that are being achieved in the online learning environment. So while some of these seem very simple and straightforward, working out their implications turns out to be quite profound when you're involved in the learning exercise. This first point I want to make is that online learning should be held to the exact same standards as all other types of learning. We have situations that arise where people expect far better outcomes from online learning than what they have in face-to-face situations. We have other instances where no matter what kind of evidence is presented, a person is not persuaded that online learning is a good thing. And the real truth of the matter is, all forms of learning taking place in any institution of higher education should be held to the same kind of standards. But we should recognize that there will be different types of evidence that will be used and different ways to approach the attainment of those standards when you're using these different kinds of environments. Meaningful learning is what we're really seeking, and that should be true at all levels of learning that happens in institutions of higher education. But meaningful learning online should happen then at the level of the credential at the level of courses, across entire programs, and it should affect every single enterprise when people are in an online environment. So if you're doing professional development for staff members, whether they're university professors or they are members of the support staff within universities, they should be able to engage in meaningful online learning as well that is every bit equal in quality to that which happens in the best exemplars that you have on your campus. Learning is one of the most complex of all human endeavors, and it's so complex that it's very difficult to measure and to measure well. It can never be fully measured. And if you think about your own learning, there are many things you come to know. There are many skills that you develop. Some of those skills developed over considerable amounts of time. Some of the insights you have in regards to various kinds of concepts, various types of knowledge, various subjects, various topics, they change over time. And sometimes it's hard to pinpoint where exactly did you learn that and how long did it take you to acquire that particular insight. Margins of error are extremely important in this conversation about online learning. Too often when we measure things in education, we assume too much about the measurements themselves. I remember watching a carpenter once outfit a kitchen and remodel a kitchen. And one of the things I was amazed at is how he could cut out a huge piece of paneling. And when he was finished, he would take it over to the wall, put it up, and it would fit precisely. But I noticed that his real secret was he measured everything at least 3 times. And by doing that, he took account of errors in measurement. There are far too many examples in higher education and in K-12 schools as well, formal education systems, where we measure once, and then we assume that that measurement is actually fully accurate. When in fact, there are always margins of error involved in measurement. And that includes even at the most precise levels of measurement that we are capable of making. The National Institutes of Standards and Technology in the United States is where a lot of those kind of metrological measurements are being taken for standard weights and measurements that are used in the United States and in many other parts of the globe. Even in those areas where you're using precise lasers and you have very, very sensitive instrumentation, there are still margins of error. And these margins of error matter greatly. Quality assurance is also something where exact answers to certain kinds of questions are very costly to achieve. There are many, many examples in life where an approximate answer is sufficient. There's a famous story about Enrico Fermi during the creation of the atomic bomb. There was concerns about how much of an impact a nuclear explosion would actually have. And nobody had any prior experience about this question. So teams of scientists set to work during the Manhattan Project to try to find a mathematical answer and establish some form of certitude on this question about just how big would such an explosion be. Enrico Fermi finished before everybody else because he basically did the calculation on the back of an envelope. Enrico Fermi realized that when you're talking about an atomic bomb, an approximate answer is good enough for their entire process to move forward. Meanwhile, other teams worked overnight throughout the night to come up with a much, much more precise answer. But at the scale at which this answer was being given and a decision was being taken, an approximate answer was good enough. There are many examples in our systems where we try to measure things, where we should actually ask ourselves, how accurate does this measurement actually have to be in order to be sufficient for us to make the kinds of necessary administrative or instructional decisions that we need to make? And in many cases, the answer to that is far less than 100%. In some cases, it's only slightly better than half. In other cases, it's about 75%. And there are some things in life where maybe we want to get into the 90 percentiles. But there are very few things in education for which we actually have to have 100% exact answer. So it's important to temper our enthusiasm for measurement, or what we're capable of measuring, versus what we should invest in terms of actually measuring. Clear standards about quality should be articulated by every institution of higher education for all their learning taking place in any kind of format. Ongoing evaluation, of course, should always accompany such efforts, and this is true in the realm of online learning as well. But that kind of evaluation could look quite different from time to time and from year to year. And what we're measuring can also change quite a bit, because in all these instances, what we're trying to do is continuously improve the system. So sometimes that means we shouldn't be measuring everything. We should really focus on particular things that are of interest at the current moment in time as we continue to evolve our systems. There is no such thing in quality assurance as one and then done. Instead, these are continuous processes that themselves evolve over time. Finally, I want to make the point that learning designers are integral to the entire quality assurance process. If we want to have quality instruction happening, if we want to have quality learning, and we want to optimize the ability of learners to learn in these various environments, it's imperative that we involve learning designers. These are people who are specialists in the design of learning environments. There's a science to it, and there's an art to it. There's a creative aspect of it, and there's a continuous innovation and improvement aspect of it. A lot of data and data analysis underlies the work of learning designers. So you'll see in most institutions that are really known for the quality of their online learning, they employ many learning designers and incorporate them in every team that's developing every program, and in many of these cases, every single course that's offered. So you have learning designers paired up with professors, with subject matter experts, and with students who are learning to really verify that learning is actually happening and to quantify and better understand the nature of that that's occurring. There are also some general principles about human performance that become extremely important. One of these is the concept that repeated measurements matter, and that takes us back to the carpenter example. The more we measure student learning in different ways and at different points in time, the better we will be able to understand precisely what it is that that student has actually accomplished. Many times we survey students about their attitudes, particularly at the end of courses, where we ask them certain questions about the experience they've just had throughout this course. All too frequently, they just focus on attitudes. We need to recognize that asking frequency kinds of data questions are equally as important. So asking how much students did of particular things, whether we're talking about the individual themselves, how much they studied, how much they reached out to the professor for assistance, how much they reached out to fellow classmates, for example. There are many examples that one could give about these kind of frequency questions. But the point is, when you ask students and you ask professors how much they do certain things, that gives you an additional point of reference to triangulate with questions you've asked about attitudinal kind of matters and also any other assessment data that you're also looking at. And triangulation, of course, is a favored technique in research enterprises because it enables us to better situate what we think we know and to explain and account for it using this multiple lens that triangulation affords us. It's also important to think about trend lines. When we talk about programs especially, or we talk about the long-term success and impact of a course that has been offered, it's very important to develop trend line data. Rolling averages are often incredibly useful to squeeze out of the measurement and the portrayal of our data some of the noise, and to really concentrate on whether what we're seeing is an actual improvement over time. There's also a corollary concept It doesn't look at trend lines, but it looks at individuals and thinks about the fact that there is no such thing as a zero. Many times, students are in examination circumstances and they do very poorly. The assumption that's frequently made is that they didn't really learn the content. But sometimes if you change the way you measure, if you change the tool you use, you may discover that they've learned much in this course. It just happens to not be the things that you examined in the way that you examined them. So there's an important concept that says that no student is ever a zero. And we should find ways to capture what a student knows. I've sometimes taken students at the end of a course or at the end of a particular unit, and the examination consisted of giving them a blank sheet of paper and telling them to write an essay to tell me everything they know they've learned about this particular topic. It's amazing sometimes to look at the responses you get, particularly if you compare them with an assessment that you gave in a more traditional kinds of way, whether it's a multiple choice examination or it's a some kind of a fill in the blank exercise or whatever the kind of particular testing kind of items that you used. What you find in this more open-ended format is that there are some people who did exceptionally well on the written exam, but actually misunderstand many key concepts. There are other students who suddenly this kind of format reveals things they learned about this topic that you didn't even think to ask. And of course, there are other examples where you see some close affinity between what was demonstrated by the one form of assessment and the other form of assessment. But we need to hold on to this idea that students learn many things that we never actually end up learning about, that they actually learned. There's an important corollary that anybody who runs large-scale assessment systems quickly discovers. I used to run a large-scale assessment system across the entire state of Rhode Island. And one of the things you see is when you kick in a new type of assessment, whatever it is, whether it's a performance-based assessment or it's a more traditional kind of an assessment tool, you see that human beings adjust their behaviors to measurement systems. And as you implement a particular new system, the system begins to adjust to whatever the expectations are that are embedded within that measurement system. This leads us to this next principle here. Be careful what you measure, because as we say in English, what you measure is what you get. So whatever you choose to measure, this is what human beings will deliver for you. And the more they become aware of your expectations, the more their behaviors rise to meet those expectations. If you introduce a new measurement tool, what you discover many times is the overall assessment results decline initially. And then once again, human beings adjust to the new system and the boats begin to rise again. Fred Mosteller, who was a very famous statistician in education in the United States, who went from Princeton to Harvard, he is well known for a saying of his that data always speaks, but it speaks softly and slyly. One of the things I've learned in the arena of measurement is that many times statisticians understand vastly more about the assumptions that underlie various statistical methods and about the nuances that exist when dealing with data that many times we ignore to our peril. And so it's very important when you're analyzing data that you involve people who know vastly more than you do about measurement. And particularly at the level of a system where you're trying to measure things across an entire unit, like a university, an entire program, it's very important to involve people who understand just how sly data can actually be. Assessing individuals, of course, is not the same as assessing courses or programs. So there are many institutions that make a mistake of simply rolling up student assessment results and then making that essentially be the surrogate for assessing the quality of the course or the quality of the program, when in fact that is only one of many needed inputs to actually assess the impact of a course or the impact of an entire program. So keeping in mind these kind of principles leads us to think about online learning in a more informed way. The paper that I will write and I'll finish it up this Saturday in order to incorporate things that might arise today that I have not presently included in the paper. We'll deal with these issues in a much more academic as well as in a much more extensive manner than what I'm presenting right now. Where do you go to learn about quality assurance in terms of what some of the best examples of it are? I'm going to suggest to you that we go to some institutions that have been doing this for a very long time. So I picked 7 universities. 7 often, of course, in different cultures is seen as a number that has to do with perfection. Why is another lengthy discussion. But let's begin with the granddaddy of online learning institutions. The University of London Worldwide is its current name. Over the years, it's had many different names, but this is the entire external programming of the University of London. They've been doing this for more than 160 years. It involves 11 of their 17 current institutions within the University of London, one of the largest universities in the world by far. They offer over 100 certificates, diplomas, and degrees, including the ability to do via research at a distance, PhD programs in every single subject that's offered by the University of London. They currently have about 50,000 students enrolling annually from all over the world. They have a proviso that if you earn any kind of a degree from the University of London Worldwide, you can automatically go on to a PhD in that area as long as you continue to make satisfactory progress. So they have people who start with earning a certificate and ultimately go on all the way to earn a PhD. They have a general prospectus for the entire University of London Worldwide, which is worth a look. You can download that free off their website. But also I would urge you to look at and pull out some detailed prospectuses for each of the different program areas where they offer degrees. These are revised annually. They're freely available. And they give you and the student as a consumer a very good explanation of what exactly this course requires, what's in the course, how your success will be measured, how often it will be measured, what the various kinds of costs are associated with it, how much time you need to devote to it, the usefulness of the degree, a whole series of things that really give us insights into their quality assurance processes. There's also, of course, additional information on their website about their quality assurance system, which is well developed. And as I say, they've been doing this for over 160 years. They're very highly regarded in terms of the quality of their degrees. And so they're a good place to begin to think about ways in which we might improve whatever we're doing right now in regards to quality assurance. The Open University is an equally prestigious institution in terms of its online degrees and online learning programs. It was established in 1969. It accepted its first students in 1971. They have over 175,000 students currently enrolling each year in their various programs. And consistent with the University of London Worldwide, you can go from an initial certificate program and their programs all the way up through a PhD in any particular subject. Some students who choose to be residential for their PhD, they actually go to their campus in Milton Keynes in order to have ready access to a variety of materials that are not just available fully online. Although obviously in situations like COVID, that has changed quite a bit. But the fact of the matter is, this is an institution, and both institutions are examples of a phenomenon now in the modern world, that you can go to first grade online and proceed from the very first year of your formal schooling all the way through to a PhD and never once set foot in a traditional kind of brick and mortar institution. And that says something about the quality that's available on online programming and its best exemplars worldwide, and the availability of programming. Now, of course, one has to have internet access and a variety of other things in place for this to be truly successful. But there are many examples and an increasing number of individuals who've done their entire formal educational journey in various online kinds of environments. Athabasca University is in Canada. It graduated its first online students in 1977. It focused originally just on online learning for adults across Canada. Over time, it's grown to accept students now from all over the world. They have about 40,000 students enrolling each year in 55 different programs, including 2 online doctorates. They have lots of detailed information about their quality assurance processes, but I'd also urge you to look at their 5-year IT strategy, which they promulgated in April of 2018. It's a very useful document, particularly in thinking about the relationship between online learning and the IT kinds of systems and strategy and ethos that is necessary in order to provide a thriving online learning environment for your students. 2 examples from the US, the University of Maryland Global Campus, which grew out of the University of Maryland at College Park. It offers 90 different degrees, including 2 doctorates. It enrolls 60,000 students annually from all over the world. Many members of the US military take programs in this particular university because no matter where they're located in the world, they can continue their learning in education. Penn State World Campus from the Pennsylvania State University, one of my alumni institutions where I did my first PhD. It offers 150 degrees and certificates. It enrolls about 15,000 students who are exclusively online, but then it's widely used by many Penn State students across their 24 campuses in the state of Pennsylvania, as well as by many, many other students around the world who take a single course or who work on a particular certificate. But as I say, 15,000 regular full-time students. 2 other examples, Arizona State University and its online and extended campus. They run a large number of programs, almost 300 programs. They enroll about 38,000 students annually in their online campuses, but this is increasing dramatically because they have begun partnerships with corporations who have distributed offices all over the United States or in other places in the world. Starbucks and Walmart being 2 big examples. So their online enrollment is going to continue to grow dramatically. They are a great source to really think about data analytics in a very extensive and powerful kind of way. They are one of the world's leaders on applying analytics to learning and to individuals. They can tell you things about their students, about the journey of their education. The one in their face-to-face campus in Phoenix has about 60 taking courses in the institution. As well, the President Michael Crow about the future of education, and I would certainly commend to you as thoughtful pieces about what education is going to look like or might look like as we continue to progress towards the future. The final example is Western Governors University. This is the only private university on this list that I provided for you, and I single them out because of the unique nature of this institution. It was established by 19 governors in Western U.S. states. They work through their professional association as governors to come up with this. And it was driven by their concern as governors to open up wider educational opportunities to their citizens. As a consequence, they wanted an institution that you could come to with whatever you've learned in anywhere, anytime, and come to an institution and figure out how to turn that into the beginnings of a degree that you could actually earn. This is a performance-based and focused learning institution at the higher education level. They offer bachelor's and master's and doctoral degrees even. They have 128,000 students right now currently enrolled from all over the world, although most of those students admittedly are in the United States. But this is a very interesting university to look at in terms of how you think about online learning and how you process learners who come to you with lots of varied life experiences. Western Governors Association and their university that is named after them has figured out how to deal with those kinds of students in a very effective way and help them through in their learning development. Of course, we need to mention that it's important to have standards about quality assurance. I would urge you to think about standards in terms of developing standards that work for your particular situation, rather than just transposing a set of standards from elsewhere and then just automatically adopting them. I think adaptation is a much better way to approach this matter. But these are examples of educational standards. I'll say far more about this in the written paper that I'm providing. But Quality Matters is well-known for their standards. They've been around for quite some time. They have 8 different domains that their standards cover. The NSQ standards were developed by Quality Matters, working in collaboration with the Learning Leadership Alliance. These are freely available, and you can download them. There's 3 different sets focused on teaching, learning, and programs. The nation of Australia, has a tertiary education and quality standards agency that's in their Department of Education at the national level. They have an online learning toolkit that's well worth a look if you're not familiar with it. It's a free download. And they have 9 domains for their particular standards. EDUCAUSE in the United States, which has grown into a global professional association for people in higher ed administration in particular who are in charge of learning programs, particularly in the online environment. They produce an annual, 2021 EDUCAUSE Horizon Report, Teaching and Learning Edition. This comes out every year. It features lots of up-to-date information. They continuously collect exemplars and exemplary programs. If you become a member of EDUCAUSE, you can also enter into collaborative research and development projects with other universities who are part of this very, very large network. And they produce an excellent conference every year as well. Finally, of course, there's the International Review of Research in Open and Distributed Learning. This frequently carries peer-reviewed articles dealing with quality assurance related matters. There's, for example, a recent one that was done that focuses on the country of Spain. And it was originally the basis for a very extensive, even more extensive doctoral dissertation on this topic that looked at quality assurance in regards and online learning standards for Spanish universities. There was also a recent one that focused on applying some standards to a particular university in Chile. Finally, I leave you with my contact information. I welcome any of your further inquiries after this conference, and I do appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Great pleasure to be with you here for us. And is there any question, dear participants? We are happy to answer your questions. I think no, but I would like to ask a question just to have a depth information about it. You know, it's not easy to establish a system, especially internal quality system in higher education institutions. But while doing this, I believe it is not easy to manage the perception, because in Turkey, I don't know, maybe some other countries, it is the same as well. It is looking like it has an overload. I mean, processed and to provide some proof that you are in the system, plan, do, PTA circle, you know. How you manage the perception of staff, academicians, and also students?
Yeah, I think I apologize too for the fact that my camera doesn't seem to be working, so you can't see me as far as I know. But I think my overall opinion is that there is over-administration going on right now around quality assurance, particularly in regards to online learning. Because I think if you go into any institution and you just ask the simple question, show me what you collect for face-to-face learning and knowing about its quality within your institution. And what you quickly discover is that's based pretty much on the way the systems always work. Professors administer examinations, they administer end of course, little questionnaires that students complete, and then that serves as the measure for face-to-face learning. And they are clearly many times trying to impose a much higher and more stringent standard for online environments. This, of course, has to be resisted. This makes no sense whatsoever. We should ask for the exact same standards of evidence for both types of learning environments, because we should be agnostic, actually, about how someone learns. Instead, we should really care for high quality evidence that they have learned. So this, of course, takes extensive negotiation. And I would point you to to the work of Michael Crow at Arizona State University. He's an example of someone who came from outside higher education. He came into an environment with a very different orientation, and he basically has revamped the entire system, and they have uniform understandings of quality. They are totally agnostic about how you go about learning something. There's an institution in the United States also called Excelsior College, which has worked with adults for many, many years. It was established about 1970. It used to be called the Regents College of the University of the State of New York. I earned a degree through this institution. And then I served on the President's Advisory Council. That kind of institution from the beginning was focused on adult learners. They've developed very good quality assurance systems, but once again, they had a very supportive leader. So I think leadership is key. You have to really bring on board and increase the understanding of the leader of your institution about some of these kinds of questions. That really involves a group of people in the university. You know, there's the formal structure of the university. And then there's the 5 groups, the 5 people you have to get in a room and get them to agree to make something happen. They may not even hold one of the formal positions in the hierarchy, but they're highly influential people. So within our universities, we have to be subversive. We have to get the 5 people you need on your side, and then you have to push an agenda that's clear, that says, this is what we want to measure, this is what we think truly matters, and you develop evidence and a very rigorous logic to say, this is why it matters, and this is why this evidence is what we should be collecting, because there is an awful lot of stuff that's collected, as my principles list sort of suggests. Going back to first principles should enable you to reduce the administrative load. It should enable you to get rid of some things that are being measured that, frankly, no one uses for any purpose whatsoever. Or it's something that could be collected in an entirely different way and has nothing to do with quality assurance. But it just got thrown into the system because somebody needed it for some other purpose. So I think it would enable us to slim down our quality assurance systems to things that truly matter. I can't pretend that this process is easy. My experience in 19 institutions of higher education in 9 countries tells me this is the same problem we are all facing everywhere. But that's where leaning on organizations like EDUCAUSE, like some of these other large-scale organizations like AECT, that's where there's power in numbers and there's power in compelling stories and compelling evidence that people have actually collected. And EDUCAUSE has been doing a very good job about capturing really exemplary examples of these kinds of things that you can then work from and work with in order to advance your own local efforts.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dennis, for your
Yes.
Okay. I think Shule, Dr. Shule, have a question, please. The floor is yours, Dr. Shule.
Yeah, I have a question for Dr. Dennis. Thank you very much. It was an informative presentation. So I have a question about, what do you think? Can you tell what's the key point for providing quality assurance in online learning? So just maybe one important point or just some. That's my question. Thank you.
The next session will be our panel, Dr. Dennis, and it's also related with accreditation and quality assurance.
Okay.
Your explanation will be an example for our session. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. So I should go ahead and answer this question, yes or not? Is there time for me to answer this question? Yes?
5 minutes more we have.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So if I was to put my finger on the toughest problem, I think the toughest problem is understanding what various parties actually truly want to know from an online learning system. So if you think about politicians have very different ideas about what matters and what they want to know about. Somebody who sits on a university board, a supervisory board, has different kinds of questions. If you're a public institution, somebody somewhere in the legislature cares to some degree about issues of quality in regards to your institution. If you're a private institution, maybe that's investors who care, or the founder. I know many Turkish universities were founded by leading business people. Sometimes that person has a particular interest. So I think the best answer is to say, begin with the things about which some of your constituencies who have influence and power care the most. And make sure you do those things first, and you do those things exceptionally well. That you've built a very good case for the evidence you've collected. You've collected the highest quality evidence you can collect. That involves sometimes assessing some things for everybody, but then taking a randomly selected sample and really collecting detailed information, because most people's entrance into quality assurance matters. It helps to have very good stories that you can feature, that you can actually make it concrete for somebody that the quality of this program is what tremendously transformed this person's life, or it changed this particular sector in our local economy because our graduates were people who led these kinds of changes. So I think developing really good stories besides the data is a very important way to actually push forward an agenda for change and helping people understand why quality matters. So I want to thank you very much. I appreciate this. I would welcome any further questions that you want to just email to me, and I'll be happy to respond to you. I'd also like to do that. Just know whatever other questions you might have that you don't have time to ask today. And that way I'll incorporate in my article that I'll finalize this Saturday. I will incorporate in the article some information that addresses some of the other concerns that you've raised that I've not talked about.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you.
For your participation and valuable explanation. Thank you. See you.
All right, take care.